Everything from clothing to household items are getting more expensive each day. American Giant is about keeping things simple and close to home. They aren't affected by tariffs because their products never leave the U.S. Support American-made tariff-free clothing with American Giant with American Giant. Get 20% off your first order when you use promo code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com. That's 20% off when you use code STAPLE20 at american-giant.com.
Good morning. Welcome to the Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir, along with the great Ryan Reed, as we welcome you on this spectacularly beautiful day. Ryan, you walk in shorts, you're feeling good.
I'm glad you noticed.
Don't read anything into that.
No, it's great weather. The city's abuzz for multiple reasons, mainly hockey related, I'd say, but
absolutely,
the playoffs and basketball are also exciting, right? So
if you love sports,
I'm wearing shorts for that reason too.
Well, if you love sports, you could not have a better weekend than this. Edmonton Oilers, what a great comeback. 4 consecutive games. The crowds in Edmonton are so special. I mean, when I describe this to friends down in the States in particular, and they ask me what's Edmonton like, and I said, well, the best way I can describe it is when the Oilers get into the playoffs, it's like people just come out. It's like you see this army. It's a religion, an army of ants. It's like, I know what it's like. In the Lord of the Rings series, one of the times they're in this dark cavern, and all these creatures start crawling out from the dark.
I'm sure Oilers fans love that comparison.
Well, I mean it in the most flattering way. The support for the Oilers is incredible. The fan park, the Ice District Plaza is just lit up with passionate people supporting their team. The crowds inside are insane, and you're there, so you see it. It must just be such a great atmosphere doesn't even begin to describe it.
Would you compare it to, I was thinking maybe college football, where it's like everyone just out and about, and it's normally like that 18 to 25 range? Would you say it's like that or no?
Yeah, it is very similar to that. Like
because I was trying to think the big football team that was there around where you were, like Iowa football, was that?
Iowa football, when they're good, is actually Iowa football is always crazy. Wisconsin football is always crazy. Big Ten, in general, people live for the tailgating and the whole experience. But I think, the Oilers fans are just special, and they are there for the team. And boy, did the team reward them with that 4-game comeback. It's really fun to watch. Now you shift over to the sport we're here to talk about. And we've got some game sevens.
Not football, not hockey.
Not football, not hockey. Those are great to talk about. But we've got 2 game sevens in a first round, which is, I think, I haven't looked at the statistics, but I think is highly, highly unusual. So I'm hoping Ryan will use his computer skills to find out. But how many game sevens generally happen in round 1 of NBA playoffs? But we want to welcome you this morning. Our goal is to bring you the best basketball coverage by focusing on one thing: excellent execution, just like a good team, Ryan. Our text line is 833-401-1440. Again, 833-401-1440.
I found the Game 7 stat for you. So the last time there was 2 Game 7s in the first round was 2020.
Okay.
That would be the Nuggets and Jazz, the 6 seeds. So the Jazz, Nuggets, and the Rockets, Thunder both had Game 7s. And last year there was a Game 7. It was just 1 in the first round. It was the Magic Cavs. I don't know if do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Yeah. That was a good one.
That was a good one. And it's interesting that Denver and Houston are once again involved in Game 7s. And we'll talk about those in just a little bit. But why don't we start with our poll question, Ryan?
It's on that Game 7 note. It's what result in the Game 7s that are to come would be the least surprising to you? On our Twitter, basketball_show. Go vote on that. It's also on the Sports 1440 Twitter. Just go on there and vote and let us know your thoughts. So Denver beating LA is the first result. LA beating Denver. Golden State beating Houston, or Houston beating Golden State. We already have a couple results here. The early leader is Denver beating LA. But go cast your vote on the Twitter. Send some texts in to 833-401-1440. It's 833-401-1440, and we'll read the best replies to to that as well as on Twitter. So let us know your thoughts on that, and we'll talk about lots of Game 7s today.
We certainly will. And in fact, that's a great segue to jump to our 3 for Deep segment presented by the 2025 Hoop City 3x3 Festival, July 31st to August 3rd in the Ice Palace in West Edmonton Mall. We have 4 FIBA 3x3 events, entry-level events, giving Canadian teams opportunity to get into the FIBA 3x3 World Tour, as well as the largest FIBA 3x3 event in North America with the top men's World Tour and the top women's series. Best teams, top 4 Canadian finishers in both genders, and we will have the Canadian women and Olympic medal winning teams here. So make your plans. It's a free event. We're going to have all kinds of activities. In fact, we're going to be doing our show from the Ice Palace on that Saturday morning on August 2nd. So we're really looking forward to that. Let's jump into the Game 7's discussion. The way I want to go with 3 from Deep is I want to touch on, actually, I'm going to go with the simplest one first. Is Cleveland good enough to win the NBA championship, Ryan?
I'll say yes. If you told me before the playoffs, I probably would have said maybe. But now it feels more definite that they have a serious chance to do it after the way they just dismantled the Heat. Granted, the Heat are not exactly a super good team this year by anybody's judgment, even Heat fans that we know, like Declan in the studio here. But the way that Cleveland took care of them the way they did, it shows that they'll destroy the teams they're meant to destroy, and they should be able to beat the teams they're meaning to beat, right? So I think... Will the Pacers give them a good series? Yes. But do I have Cleveland winning that and giving the Celtics a good fight in the conference final and perhaps even making the final and giving a shot there? Absolutely.
Cleveland is definitely, I agree with you, Cleveland is definitely good enough. They're definitely talented enough. But always, you never know how experience and how matchups work. We have a great conversation coming up with Pat Boylan, who's the play-by-play voice of the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever. And I had an interview with him yesterday, and we're going to play part of that. And you can hear the entire interview on our podcast, but we'll talk about that more later. But he talked about, and I'm not trying to steal his thunder, but he talked about for Indiana to be seriously competitive, they have to play perfect basketball. Indiana's a deep team. But Cleveland is a deep team with more talent. And that's what's going to be interesting, is to see how a better team than the Miami Heat are, because that was a bad team. That was the weakest team in the playoffs.
But last year, they'd give close games to teams that they weren't really supposed to. That's what I'm kind of noticing the difference is. They're just destroying the teams they're supposed to destroy. Yeah, they are. And they had that little hiccup after the All-Star game break where they lost 4 in a row. Kings were one of those.
Yeah, geez. I thought maybe we could get through a segment, but I should know better by now. But the Kings and 3 other teams defeated them in a 4-game losing streak, them being the Cavaliers. But then the Cavs have just taken care of business since then. An incredible season. So I think we both agree. Are they good enough? Absolutely. But there are a couple of other teams that we think are good enough too, and we'll talk about that later. Game 7s. We've got Denver and the LA Clippers today. And the game the other night was indicative of what can happen when a good team has great performances by their best players. James Harden has a history of phenomenal regular seasons and less than phenomenal postseasons. Certainly was not the case that night. Kawhi Leonard was Kawhi Leonard at his very best. But the difference maker is Norm Powell. He was number 3 of the big 3 with a fantastic third quarter performance and a great fourth quarter performance as well. Nuggets are in trouble. The Nuggets are in trouble. It's a great Game 7. Are they capable of beating L.A.? Absolutely.
They need Jamal Murray.
They need Jamal Murray to do more than he had a great first quarter, disappeared. And you have to give a lot of credit to the L.A. Clipper defense. It's not like Jamal wasn't trying. But they're going to need one of the epic Nikola Jokic performances in order to be able to win this Game 7. And the thing about the Clippers is they bother Jokic.
Zubats bothers.
Zubats matches up and bothers Jokic, I think more so than any other center I've seen. He has that same he has the European smarts. He understands its games and also his game, Jokic's game. But also, this, Ryan, is the result of a 7-game series. Getting used to
each other. Yeah, exactly.
You learn each other. You know, you start instinctively reacting, not guessing to what is going to happen next, what a player might do. And no one is harder to figure out than Jokic. And it's not like he's not playing well. He's just not being the dominant, overwhelming force that we're used to seeing.
He's not being the best player in the league, which he was the entire season, right? He's more of like second or third. And for him, that's quite a step down.
It is.
Right? So he was above and beyond in every category throughout the entire season. And now Giannis has been better than him this playoffs. And again, it's not like Jokic. I'm not diminishing what Jokic has done. He's still averaging likely a triple-double and 28 points a night. But Giannis has been better than him this playoffs. And he's taken a little bit of a step down, and that is due to Croatia's Ivica Zubac.
But absolutely. Zubac has been outstanding. And the Clippers, they look primed and ready to go. And part of this has to go. There's an X factor here. Tyronn Lue is a really good coach.
NBA champ.
NBA champ. Ty Lue is a good coach and a good man, and he is liked, respected, and the players are dedicated to Ty Lue.
He got LeBron's blessing, and it was just uphill. It was just downhill from there.
Yeah. Well, that really is great. I'm such a LeBron fan, but Ty Lue, and then having Adelman have to step in with 3 games to go in the regular season. And again, we touched on this many times, Ryan. You can't teach stupid any more than what the Mavericks did anymore.
I'm more aware than anybody.
I know, 100%. But you can't teach stupid and fire a guy 3 games before because you think you're giving the team the best chance to win in the playoffs with a career assistant coach. Nothing against Adelman. And, I mean, his bloodlines are great. His dad was a great NBA coach for a long, long time. I'm sure Adelman will be a great NBA coach, but he's never been a head coach.
He's won 3 playoff games.
Hey, that's right. He's 3-3. He's 500 in playoffs.
He's almost won as many playoff games as he has total games.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And it just, to me, as it always does with Denver, particularly with the thin lineup they have, the injury to Porter, this is all the sun's going to rise or set on Jokic's broad shoulders. That's what's going to happen. Let's jump over to the other one because, I have a theory that once you take your foot off the gas, you don't just hit the gas again and go up to 200 kilometers an hour. I thought it was obvious that Golden State went into Houston with no intent of winning game number 5. They went in when they were up 3-1, and they rested Curry and Jimmy Butler for most of the night, gambling that they would be rested and ready to go and healthier to be able to put Houston away. But the Houston Rockets and a former Raptor, and by the way, I'm going to just a real quick lament. Norm Powell, Fred VanVleet, former Raptors playing huge roles in the success of their teams in the playoffs. Huge.
Kawhi, too.
Kawhi Leonard. All 3 slipping through the grasp of the Toronto Raptors, and the Raptors making hard business decisions that they had to make because of what they would have had to pay these players. But when I look at what they could have paid these guys and kept them and built around them, Kawhi was they offered Kawhi the world. Kawhi wanted to go home.
They gave him the province of Saskatchewan. That was a part of the offer.
That was part of it. That was part of it. He could have had, he was going to be able to have free donuts or something at some shop in Toronto. But anyway, that aside, the Houston Rockets have been so tough in the last 2 games. And last night they were clearly the tougher team. Now, I think the physical play of the series is a bit out of hand. I think.
And coming from you, that means something, too.
Well, it does. It does. The clutching and grabbing of shooters is something that, having been a shooter, having a son who's a great shooter.
Having a producer that's a great shooter.
Have a producer that was a great shooter. That I do not have patience for officials allowing. It's the same way I feel about the NHL and the way that a player like McDavid is clutched and grabbed and beaten up when you have far lesser talented people physically, I think, physically fouling or disrupting a player inappropriately from being able to move the way they should be able to. That's my tangent. But the bottom line is Houston has their number right now. And for Golden State to win with their lack of presence in the middle is going to be really tough going back to Houston. Houston is confident. Now, Freddie VanVleet's been unconscious, as he can be. He is just shooting
playoff
the lights
Freddie.
Playoff Freddie. You got to love him. And what amazes me is when you look at Freddie VanVleet and his skill set, his physical talents versus Steph Curry, I look at how they're able to get Freddie all these wide open looks. And that's because Golden State doesn't focus on him, and they're making man-to-man adjustments where Houston's zone defensive strategy has been utter genius that has completely thrown Golden State out of any rhythm. And the shots that Curry's used to getting, he's not getting. And the other players a couple of games ago were knocking them down. Now they're not, and they seem genuinely shaken and rattled.
You mentioned Curry not playing well, and he straight up didn't. He was 6 of 16 from 3. He did put up 29 points, but you could tell the whole game he just wasn't really what he normally was.
And those were early.
And fair enough.
Third and
They
fourth
figured
quarter,
it out late. You're right.
Yeah, fourth quarter, he was rushing shots from not just distance. There are distances he can hit shots from, but even Steph Curry, the greatest shooter of all time, has to have a rhythm in his shots. And he did not have any rhythm in his shots at all.
No, he did. And they figured something out. The Rockets are going back to Houston thinking they figured something out, and it's unfair to think they haven't, right? Steven Adams was playing huge minutes. His plus minus, it was drastic different, like 30, 40 plus point difference when he was on versus when he was off. And playing him with Şengün, it
genius.
Worked.
Absolute genius. In that zone, that negates them having to chase players out to the three-point line.
And they don't have to worry about half these guys on the Warriors. Like Gary Payton is not exactly a shooter, right?
No.
Quentin Post, TJD, they're both decent players, and Post can shoot a little bit, but you're just not really worried about him. Buddy Hield at 0 points.
Buddy Hield, to me, is an abomination.
I've watched him hundreds and hundreds of games, and I warn every fan base of him whenever he shows up. He's like, it'll be a great 2 months. I call it the honeymoon phase. And then falls apart.
You lived with him with the Kings. He is one of the biggest disappointments to me because he's always been noted as a poor defender. And
Oklahoma, he was okay. I'm pretty sure in Oklahoma he was an okay defender, but it was college.
And he was 20, and
he's also way older than everybody.
Well, and Buddy Hield was old, and to me that's an advantage going into the NBA, not a disadvantage. But boy, whatever he does in the offseason, or maybe the league's just too good for him now. Like it could be that. It just could be that because he just is not. He has not been able to be a net contributor where they need it most, which is knocking down meaningful threes at meaningful times.
Like he's not Doncic. Like he's not 39, 7, and 8. He's 0, 0, and 3. That's his stat line. So there's no excuse not to play defense.
My college coach always said if you have zeros in any stat category, you may as well be in the morgue because you're of no value. I get as much out of somebody from the morgue as I get out of you. So maybe come sit on the bench and think about it for a little bit. But unfortunately for Kerr and Steph, they just haven't had enough. They don't have enough right now. Butler was great. Butler was tough. But I have one technical criticism of Steve Kerr, and I'm not sure if this is fair or not, but he and his staff have not figured out how to attack the zone that Houston has. And one of the things I notice is I think is because of the actions they're trying to run for Curry, but they run too much on the perimeter and not enough running the ball through the middle of the zone. You really have to attack the middle almost all the time. You have to get the ball into the middle against the zone in order to be able to create, to find gaps in the zone, because zones always have gaps, but you got to find the gap, and then you've got to find the next gap, which could be a skip pass or whatever. But they're not doing that, and they're very stagnant. And, I mean, Draymond Green is a great passer, but the zone takes away a lot of great passing opportunities. When you're playing against a good zone, You have to be able to move the ball, run it through the middle, and hit open shots. And when you start hitting open shots, that creates attack lanes where you get more open shots. And the Warriors are just so stagnant. Plus, Amen Thompson, he's got Curry's number. And when you look at it, Curry's 6'3", Amen's about 6'5", 6'6", freakishly athletic, 15-year younger legs, and he has really dogged Steph Curry and done a phenomenal job. So, okay, let's before we go to break, what's your pick?
For the Game 7 for both games?
Yeah.
For Clippers Nuggets, I'm going to say the Clippers win. I think Jokic gets back on track and has a ridiculous, let's say 30, 20, and 10 game. But I think his supporting cast just isn't good enough. I think Jamal Murray may has 15 or 16 points, and they lose by 5 points to the Clippers with the Kawhi and James. Maybe James Harden doesn't go as nuclear, but Kawhi's good. And then for the Warriors Rockets games, I'm going to say I just have bad experience with Curry in Game 7. When he played the Kings, he had 50 in Game 7 after we thought we figured him out. So I think the Rockets may fall into that trap as well. Maybe Curry won't have 50, but I think Curry goes nuclear. He has 40+. Jimmy Butler is 27 and 8, and I think the Warriors win by 3 or 4. I think they're too good. Not like a zone defense is as you mentioned, it's very effective if played well. But there's a reason everyone in the NBA plays man, because zone, once you figure it out, it's simple. Like, not simple, but it's straightforward.
It is, except for one X factor again in this series, and that is Houston has massive presences on the back end.
The Warriors aren't playing Kuminga. So.
No, they're not. So, I mean, they have got – they're so massive around the basket, and they're so athletic in the wings that I agree. Here's the thing. I agree with you. A bad zone's easy to beat once you figure it out. A bad zone bothers you at first, but a good zone is really tough. And it wears you out over 48 minutes. And that's the thing. Houston can recover so quickly in their zone on the wings, and they're so big in the middle, and you've got Draymond Green at 6'6", going against 6'10" and 7 feet.
And big dudes too, not just strong guys.
Strong dudes. And I love Steven Adams. Like, he to me is like, he's just
great guy too. He's funny too.
Oh, he's hilarious, and he's tough as heck. And he played rugby. Like, he's a beast. So I'm going to go with Denver and Houston.
So just we're on different pages here, I guess. There we go.
But I have no idea. I have no real feel for either game about who's going to show up.
That'll make it more entertaining, I guess, right? Like, sometimes the Game 7s, you kind of like, oh, this team's going to win. But it was a good series. Yeah. But this, you just don't really know.
Right now, I have no idea. Like, will James Harden have a game similar? Will Norm Powell be able to contribute in the same way? Will other Warriors step up along with Steph Curry having a better, more impactful game? Like, all kinds of both series have all kinds of question marks surrounding them. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Lakers and the T-Wolves, and we're also going to talk about the Edmonton Stingers. The CEBL season starts a week from tomorrow, and we're going to be back and talk a little Stingers as we get ready for the great CEBL season to get underway. Thanks so much for spending this beautiful morning with us. We've got a phenomenal show coming up. We've got a treat with an interview I did this week with not just Pat Boylan, but with Chris Broussard, one of the big names in basketball analysis in the U.S. And I had a great discussion with Chris, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. This is The Basketball Show, Paul and Ryan on Sports 1440. What a song, Mike. If anybody knows the actual lyrics, I'd love to hear, because I think I understand one word in other than Wooly Bully, but I just love that song. Can't believe that's 62 years old. Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. If you see the video of it, it's just hilarious. But what a great song. So welcome back to The Basketball Show. Sports 1440. Paul, Sir Ryan Reed, rocking with all the goings on in the great world of basketball right now. We made a little bit of an adjustment on the fly. We're going to do our last segment on the Edmonton Stingers because we want to dedicate a few minutes that really need to be dedicated to the Wolves routing, thumping, destroying the dysfunctional.
You have a thesaurus over there?
dysfunctional Los Angeles Lakers in 5. I'll tell you what, Ryan. The Wolves go 7 for 47 from three-point land and win. Rudy Gobert is Wilt Chamberlain in Game 5. Wilt Chamberlain.
Yeah, he's playing against the same height of guys Wilt played against too.
100%.
He's playing a bunch of like 6'8" guys.
Yeah, a bunch of 6'8" guys. 27 and 24. But you still got to put the 27 in, and you still got to work to get the 24. It's not just because you have a height advantage. You got to be chasing it, because a lot of times it looks like Rudy Gobert isn't even on the court. Like his 7'2" frame is almost invisible. But that night he was a monster. Anthony Edwards was human, average.
0 for 11 from 3, I think.
Yeah, 0 for 11 from 3.
He said
Wolves from 3 were just...
There was a funny quote from Anthony Edwards, too. He said he was 0 for 11. And he said the guy courtside was like, "You're 0 for 11, man. Stop shooting." And Anthony Edwards turns out, "Get ahead, beat the traffic. We're going to whoop you guys."
Edwards is a character. He's very polarizing to old players. Kevin Garnett just came out with some commentary, and Kevin's a little bit of that old school bitter guy.
He's a mini legend, though, too.
Oh, but is he ever? In fact, my son Steve ran into him in a Foot Locker in Minnetonka.
Was he hurt?
No, he was just out there shopping. And he was in a Foot Locker. I believe this is the way the story goes, but he was in a Foot Locker and saw Garnett, and he happened to have a Slam magazine. Steve was in Slam, and he had his Slam magazine. And he asked Garnett to sign it, and he goes, "There you go." He wrote something into like, "Yo, dog," or something, like just a great signature. But anyway, Garnett came out saying that old guys don't really like Anthony Edwards because a lot of his derogatory commentary, and I would equate that with I don't disagree with him. Anthony Edwards, very engaging, very charismatic, really a great primetime player. I'm not big on his post-game first guys he goes and hugs are some buddies on the sideline, ignoring his teammates and his opponents to go hug a rapper or somebody that's there as a fan. I'm not big on that. Like I'm splitting hairs here, and I'm an old guy. I'm old school, but I just sometimes he says things that show he's a really young guy and not terribly well aware or well versed in NBA history. He'll learn over time because he's so young. I
think that is it, though. But he's obviously going to make mistakes, and maybe he can be a little bit better with what he's doing, especially with.
Well, this is from a young guy. You're absolutely
fair enough.
right.
He's actually born.
And I'm an old guy, still making mistakes.
He's born another guy. Franz Wagner's my age. He's also Anthony Edwards is also August 01, just like me. So we have a little bit of a fan club here.
Absolutely.
Of the August 01 guys. But yeah, he's one of us, and I feel like, of course, he can be better, but he's also learning. He's never been a celebrity before, obviously, and like when he was like 5 or 6. So he's just figuring out as he goes along, and he's had a couple bad mistakes, but he hasn't messed up monumentally where it's like
100%
illegal.
He's not John
like
Morant.
Exactly.
He's not John Morant. And I totally agree with you. Bit of a tangent on bit of an old school, crusty old remark there. But here's what's interesting. I think the fanfare around, I think this is safe to say, to frame what we're going to talk about. The fanfare around the Luka Doncic trade was, how in the world did Los Angeles pull this off? They are guaranteed that they are going to win a championship. Maybe not this year, but not that far in the future. And Luka was a bit hurt because he took a bad fall. He's had injuries this year, but I don't think you can. I don't think you can deny this, Ryan. If you don't come game ready, as LeBron said after the game, got to be in playoff ready shape. If you're not in playoff ready shape, you're going to look like Luka looks. He looks out of shape. Part of it is his body type and the fact that he's carrying probably 30 that he doesn't need to be a great player, 20 to 30. He's a big boned guy. He's a big, strong guy. But he is not, you cannot look at Luka and say, that guy is spending the time in the offseason getting ready. A lot of it is because he plays all the time, too. He's playing for his nation. There's circumstances, and I don't question his love and dedication to the game, nor his greatness. But the trade itself was bizarre, And L.A. is so flawed, especially when they didn't pick the kid up from Charlotte that they wanted.
Mark
that was
Williams? Yeah.
Williams, yeah. He was going to be their big in the middle. That would have made a difference because they're playing really weak players. Really weak players. Like when you look beyond Luka and then LeBron, and then Rui Hachimura had a pretty nice series.
And Reeves was a ghost in the last game there.
Reeves was a ghost. Reeves was, I think, and I have to give a lot of credit to Minnesota. Minnesota's really a good defensive team, and you saw that night in Game 5. But I think the Lakers are flawed. They're going to have to make some adjustments. But now, all of a sudden, there's talk of what's LeBron going to do? Is he going to retire? Or is he come back for another year? If I'm LeBron, I'm thinking about it. Maybe he can flop in another. I mean, maybe he can play in another sport. Worst flopper though.
Yeah.
Did you see the flop, the ridiculous flop when DiVincenzo and he quasi collided at that one time when LeBron went down?
Thought he was dead.
Oh, he had one of those spike, nails in the end of a baseball bat that you just whacked him. He went down so hard.
Then he popped right back up and
barely touched the guy. I've seen a number of posts, and it has swayed me quite a bit about how damaging it is to LeBron's claim on being the best player of all time. I heard the other day, I think the best summary of LeBron, he has had the greatest career of anybody in the NBA in history, but he's not the greatest player. He's a great player. He's one of the great players. But when you look at the flops over his career, it's just unbecoming of a player of his status. That's what you have to resort to and look like you've been, like I said, beaten mercilessly, and you cannot get up. Somehow, Rocky getting up off the canvas is what you look at Ron, and he's not even touched, hardly touched. I can't stand that. I'm really being a crusty old guy here.
No, I think it's a fair assessment. I think there's a little bit maybe a little bit of nuance because I think it's kind of the sign of the times. Maybe like I think everybody flops to some extent.
Yeah, Manu Ginobili he kind of popularized it to the highest level, bringing that Argentinian soccer flop into the game. But again, let's get back to, I've taken us off course here. I really want to get back to the game and the Wolves. You have to give the Wolves a lot of credit because they had to go through a very up and down season with the combination of the big trade of sending Karl Anthony Towns to New York and bringing in Randall and DiVincenzo. And it took a long time between adaptations and adjustments and injuries to find their way. And they seem to have found their way to this point where they really have figured it out. And Ant's emergence as such a great player, but Randall's been a rock star. Alan Horton, the Timberwolves play-by-play guy, talking last week with us about it's great to have that kind of old school post presence. Back to the basket, rough, drop your shoulder, initiate contact, make the other opponent pay physically for guarding you. Randall has been fantastic. And DiVincenzo in spurts, he makes plays that matter. And I think, other Wolves have emerged too, and their depth. They just handled L.A. They just plain handled L.A.
They didn't really have an advantage, L.A. in any way. Like LeBron played well. He had one game where 38 and 10. But then again in that game he was outplayed by Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves. And then when Doncic was going off, I think Doncic on the series averaged 39 and 10 or something like that. It was pretty insane numbers. He had a couple games where he went off. But then again, it was just countered perfectly by Minnesota and their team play and their defense corralling Doncic in certain areas and taking advantage of him on the defensive end. For example, this season, Doncic had 44.7% of the time was blown by. And that's
a
for people not familiar with
stat.
that means you are destroyed. That's the worst thing that can happen to you defensively. I'm very familiar with getting blown by. It's not a fun experience.
No, I am too. And I mean, whenever you extend, and it's one of the things the NBA does that I still am perplexed at, particularly when you've got penetrators like James Harden. When I'm watching James Harden on the Clippers being guarded by Jamal or whoever on the Nuggets, and they're 45 feet away from the basket, checking him, pushing him left, and he just blows by him. He just walks. I mean, he just blows by him, gets him on his back.
Are they like defending a screen maybe, or just straight up one-on-one defense?
I'm talking straight up one-on-one, like picking him up at half
back
court.
Back in the day with Harden, it was like you stand behind him with your hands behind your back. Remember that when they didn't want to foul him for 3 on the step back?
Yeah.
Rubio did that, and it didn't really work. I want to say, but
nothing worked at that time with
Harden.
Harden.
It was interesting.
Yeah, Harden was a
Speaking of flopping to something.
Oh my gosh! Oh my he was
blow by actually while we're at it too. Both that season, you got blown by on defense a lot, and he flopped a little bit on threes too. But then again, it was a ridiculous offensive season. I'm not diminishing that.
Yeah, I think that was the season he averaged 37 plus or whatever. But anyway, for the Wolves now, who's their next opponent?
It'll be the winner of the Warriors series.
That will be interesting, especially if it's Houston. It'll be interesting. That'll be a great series. Either team will be a great series for completely different reasons. But can you imagine Houston and the Wolves in the physical play of both teams going toe-to-toe? Rudy and Randall against the two bigs from Houston, the Twin Towers. Unbelievable.
My guess with not the first time Twin Towers have been in Houston.
No, it isn't. No, absolutely. Ralph and
with Anthony, I think my prediction, if it is the Rockets who move on, they kind of give the Anthony Edwards, the Doncic or LeBron treatment. They let them beat, like they just don't let anybody else beat you. They'll let you have your points. Anthony Edwards might have 35-40 one game, but I think Houston's going to try as hard as flip it around. Minnesota's going to have one player on the Rockets, let them, like Fred VanVleet, for example, or one time a game where their player is going to have 35 or 40 points, but they're not going to let the team beat them.
Yep.
Does that make sense? Kind of what the Minnesota did to L.A., where Doncic or LeBron would have take turns going off on guys, but they're like, you know what? You can have your shots, you can have your layups. We're not letting anybody else beat us, though, and it resulted them winning in 5. So I think Minnesota's kind of settled into that identity.
They have. Minnesota's identity as a physical skilled defensive team. And that's the thing I find with them. They're physical and skilled, but Houston's physical and skilled too. So some just phenomenal second round matchups that we don't even know about yet. And I think we've had a lot of fun framing those second round matchups for you. And boy, oh boy, have we got 2 games that are going to be so fun to watch in the NBA today and tomorrow. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, I'm going to have part of the interview that I just recorded yesterday with Pat Boylan from the Indiana Pacers and Fever, and we're going to talk about the Pacers' second round matchup against a very, very daunting Cleveland Cavalier team. Great time for hoops. Thanks again. Beautiful day in Edmonton. Enjoy it after you've listened to our show. And this is Ryan and Paul on your sports leader, Sports 1440. Welcome back to the Basketball Show. I'm your host, Paul Sir, and I am so pleased to be joined by Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of both the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Fever of the WNBA. Pat, thanks so much for making time today.
Hey, it's good to be back with you. I appreciate the invite.
So, Pat, the Pacers come through a five-game series with Milwaukee. They had their way with the Bucks. But talk about the last game. It really was historic, somewhat hysterical, and filled with, I think, a combination of drama and soap opera outcomes. Talk about the last game.
Yeah, Game 5, I haven't personally seen anything quite like that. I've been with the franchise for 11 years now. I grew up here, so I was born in 1990, and my childhood was Reggie Miller. So I know all about Pacers playoff heroic moments and comebacks and all of that, but I haven't seen anything quite like that. You know, when Gary Trent Jr. was just going bonkers, and at one point the Milwaukee lead was 7 with 40 seconds to go. That's not literally unsurmountable, but especially in the playoffs when you're taking on good teams, and you know, sometimes weirdness happens in the regular season that when teams are 100% locked in, you just don't see it in the playoffs. Look, I don't want to say I didn't think the Pacers were capable or had any chance, but my mind had already turned to Game 6 in Milwaukee, and you know, all of a sudden a couple things go your way. AJ Green misses a free throw, so instead of an 8-point game, it's a 7-point game. And then, you know, really just a couple of understated plays that the Pacers don't even have a chance to consider a comeback win without. And one of them was Canadian Andrew Nembhard, after that missed free throw, stepped into like a 30-footer and just drilled it. And he misses that shot, it's game over. It's a 7-point game. game, with 35 seconds left or so, and Milwaukee's going back to the free throw line to make it an 8 or 9 point game, it's over. So if he misses that shot, we're talking about Game 6 happening on Friday night in Milwaukee. And then just a couple of wild plays, and one involving Nembhard again. He comes up with a steal on Gary Trent Jr.'s bad pass on the following possession. Halliburton gets an and one, and all of a sudden it's a 1 point game, but still you're down one without the ball. And with 15 seconds or so left, you still probably lose in that scenario 90% of the time. But Gary Trent Jr. had his Bill Buckner moment. The ball went through his legs. It's just an insane overtime for him where he hit 4 threes, looked like he won the game for Milwaukee, and then made the two, worst plays of the night with 2 turnovers, and then the Halliburton winner on the lay-in. And, I was walking over to do the post-game interview, and my head was spinning. And I've never had a moment like that where my head was just like, it was like I couldn't see straight. Because it was just so surreal. The game was over. Game 6 was, in my mind, a foregone conclusion. And all of a sudden, in a matter of 2 to 3 real-time minutes, the Pacers had not just won the game, but, Paul, the craziness of it was just the finality of it, too, because you see crazy finishes from time to time, but that crazy finish, and then that ends Milwaukee's series, and the Pacers are moving on, and all of that, just kind of coming together within a few seconds it was so wild to experience. It's been a few days since that game, but, I'm still having trouble describing and finding the correct words to describe it, but it's one of those reasons why you love sports, right? I mean, we love it because you just never know what's going to happen. It's not scripted, and that was a late comeback for the ages for the Pacers on Tuesday.
Comeback for the ages. Here's a stat: since 1997, teams that have been down 7 with 40 seconds to go are 0 and 1,609.
I did see that. Yes.
That's an unbelievable stat, which I think frames the significance of this victory, this seemingly impossible, and to have all of those things happening within that time frame, it just was remarkable, because as I was following it online, and I saw where they were down, and I was thinking, that's over. Then you go, click. Oh my goodness, this is getting interesting. And of course, going back and watching it now, this isn't without its controversy. And I think this has been there have been many things that I think, Pat, have marked these playoffs, this first round of a really interesting playoff series. But one of the areas has been the NBA admitting its mistakes. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this, because the NBA, as they've done in other situations, came out and said AJ Green did not commit the foul on Halliburton. It shouldn't have been an and one. And that would have been hugely significant in the outcome and the scenario that you painted before. Now, whether or not it was a foul, and because even last night, watching a call reversal in the Knicks-Pistons game, where I thought clearly Brunson, the clutch of all clutch players, has a call reversed. Is it a good thing, to have the replays where they're reversing foul calls now, understanding that the intent is to get it right, but B, when they do miss it in critical situations, and this is one of 2 or 3 really critical game-changing situations, is it good for the NBA to come out and say, you know what, we blew it?
Yeah, it's a $1 million question, and there's a lot of angles you can take on this. And yes, I have my own thoughts, which are, I personally don't think it does the NBA a whole lot of good, especially in the AJ Green situation, to come out with this, because what invariably happens is, look, basketball, in my opinion, is the toughest sport to officiate. And what I'm about to say here, I would feel the exact same way if the role were reversed in a situation like this. The refs in the final 5 minutes or the final 2 minutes, have to make endless calls, have to make 100 different calls over the course of, the final 2 minutes and overtime. And for them to only quote unquote miss one is actually quite impressive. But what actually ends up happening is everybody circles one moment and they say this game could have been totally different if it was called in a different direction. And the reality of the situation is TV broadcasts and cameras have gotten so good that we have the ability to look at 25 different angles in super slow-mo, in hyper HD, and on the 8th replay, we go, oh, wait, they got that wrong. And the 100%. Officials have one angle and one speed. And now each of these is a case-by-case scenario. I'm talking about the AJ Green call here because to me, that's one of those where I say, look, you could do a last 2-minute report for the whole game and maybe find 15 calls that went against Indiana and 15 calls that went against Milwaukee. And so in that instance, I don't really consider that a game-changing type of call. Every once in a while, they do come up. And a great example of that would be Detroit and New York in Game 4 when there was a clear foul in the corner on, I believe, Hardaway Jr. and Josh Hart committed the foul. And that was a clear foul on a 3-point shot with the clock at 0. And he goes to the line down 1, and all he has to do is hit 2 of those 3, and then the result is literally different. To me, that's a very different scenario. And what's hard is I could talk about this with you for an hour, but what's hard is you can change called fouls because the foul call in of itself puts a dead ball on the situation. However, you can't challenge non-called fouls because in most situations, you can't just stop the game to challenge it when there's no whistle. So that's a tough aspect of this too. And I guess just looking back at it, maybe the right move is to call it if you're not sure, is to call it a foul, and then that gives you the chance to go back and look at it and reverse that call. You can't reverse a non-call, but you can reverse a call. So it's speaking of head spinning, this topic is as well, and it's in my opinion, in a scenario where refs. Because I believe the last 2-minute report in the Pacers situation includes overtime. So you're talking 7 minutes there. If they miss one call, that's actually really good. And to me, it does the NBA no good to be spotlighting something like that. But in the situation where they miss a literal game-changing call, ball in the air, clock is at 0 or close to it in the Detroit game, that's a very different situation, and that's for people smarter than me to figure out. But you hate to have playoff games that end like Game 4 in Detroit did, that's for sure.
That is for sure. And I'm talking with Pat Boylan, the play-by-play voice of both the Indiana Fever and the Indiana Pacers here on the Basketball Show. Now, there's a lot of surreal moments in any season of any sport, but I think the NBA had an exceptional year of bizarre occurrences. The Doncic trade, on and on. But one of the things that came out towards the end of the season, and maybe it even happened in the playoffs, Pat, was The Athletic does this survey with NBA players. They poll the players on a variety of questions. I think it was 90 players. And one of the questions is, who's the most overrated player in the league? And Tyrese Halliburton is picked by a substantial margin. Now, that to me that was just strange that a reputable publication would choose to go this direction. But what I was impressed with was the way Halliburton handled it. I would say not only ignored it, but kind of rubbed everybody's face in it with a real good series, but an unbelievable last couple of minutes in this historic game. Fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, how do you counteract something like that if you want to? Well, you go make clutch play after clutch play after clutch play. And when we were going through the blow by blow of game number 5, I didn't even mention the fact that the Pacers were down 4 with 40 seconds left in regulation. So they overcame that deficit too. And how did they do that? Well, Tyrese Halliburton had the game-tying dunk to send it into overtime. He hit the first three to start overtime. He has the and one with A.J. Green with the call that we were just talking about to pull the Pacers within one. And then he beats Giannis, a top 5 defender in the game, to get to the rim to win the game. So you want to dispel any sort of overrated narrative. That's how you do it. And Tyrese, I'll tell you, he's a different type of player, but in a lot of ways reminds me so much of Reggie Miller because he's not afraid to talk a little trash. And people in Indianapolis love that. It's why they love Lance Stevenson. And it's not because we're a trash talking city. In fact, quite the opposite. It's a pretty humble city, but
yes.
with bigger markets all around us, the fan base here feels like, we're forgotten about sometimes. And so when someone's willing to come here, especially like Reggie Miller and Lance Stevenson and Tyrese Halliburton, who are not from Indianapolis, and they're willing, to chirp and back the franchise in the city, the people here eat that up. And so, he deserved his moment after that. And reality on the Athletic thing, if you look at a lot of names on that list, you could say a lot of things about a lot of those guys, but overrated would not be how I would describe LeBron James or Jimmy Butler, who are also high on that list. Now, Butler, you could use a few other adjectives, but overrated would not be one of them. That's
right.
For sure. And, I tend to think that list is sort of a combination of a few things. One thing that I think is actually kind of significant and maybe doesn't get talked about enough as it relates to this is Tyrese Halliburton was, maybe the last guy to make Team USA on that Olympic roster. And there were a lot of guys who probably could have filled that final spot, but it was Halliburton. And I think there probably was a little bit of jealousy there. He's not afraid to trash talk. And so I think that probably didn't earn him any bonus points in this category. And he got off to a poor start to the season. And there was a lot of spotlight on his first month and a half where, frankly, he was not good. And so I think a lot of people remembered that and then didn't necessarily notice that his final 5 months of the season, he was playing at an all-NBA level. In fact, I think he's got a chance to make an all-NBA team, despite the fact that he wasn't an all-star, which is kind of crazy. So, he has totally transformed this Pacers franchise. The franchise seemed kind of rudderless for a few years there, and the Tyrese Halliburton trade instantly jettisoned the Pacers into a direction of making the playoffs. They've now won 3 playoff series each of the last 2 years. And it's not just Halliburton. There's a whole lot that goes into this and many players that are key. But Halliburton is the Pacers' best player. And in the NBA, your best player goes a long way in determining your team's level of success. And he has totally changed the fortunes of this franchise. So as far as anyone here is concerned, he can get 100% of those votes if he keeps doing what he's doing. And he had some moments that I think will make maybe some of those guys rethink that thought if this survey comes back out next year.
Luckily, they're anonymous and no different than the trolling that happens on social media. So, yeah, it was great to see that kind of response from Halliburton. I don't want to spend any time on this, but it also is demonstrative of how emotions can run so high with the confrontation of Halliburton's father with Giannis after the game, how unfortunate that is. But I have to tell you, I've seen that happen so many times at so many levels throughout my coaching and playing career, Pat, that I'm not surprised, to be honest. I'm sure everybody's disappointed, but when emotions are running that high, parents are crazy, no matter how old their kids are. And I'm speaking as a parent and how crazy I could get when my sons were playing. And so I looked at that and went, God, that's too bad. But I remember when I was coaching a local university, one of the dads coming off mad at the officials, pushed the official, banned for life from all the games. It's too bad, but it happens.
Yeah. It's, you know what, it is too bad because Tyrese Halliburton deserved, in my opinion, the conversation on Wednesday morning on all the sports talk shows to be about his heroics down the stretch. And I know his dad feels bad about that. I've had the chance to talk with John before, and let me tell you, the guy, A, has a heart of gold, and B, is just unapologetically enthusiastic and loving of his son. And he went overboard. No question. Should not have been there. No question. And he will probably be the first to tell you that he deserves, a reprimand that, might or might not be coming. And, he made a mistake, but to me, it's just, and I'm not surprised by this because it's just kind of the nature of the beast of talk TV and radio and where we are, where people would rather talk about something like this than the actual on-court product and what John Halliburton's son did. I just wish that was the focus of all of this. And we talked Caitlin Clark and all of the theatrics about that a couple of times on your show, and just the things that are out of players' control and the things that go viral nationally that have nothing to do with basketball. That's my only slight disappointment of the way that Game 5 ended. Is I wish that there was more of a focus on everything that Halliburton and the Pacers did to close out the series, and less about a dad who had a bad moment. But look, at the end of the day, Giannis wasn't hurt. He wasn't physically hurt. John didn't do anything to him. He was he was just in a spot that he shouldn't have been. And I thought Tyrese handled it perfectly. And when we have these conversations about Caitlin, the thing I keep saying to you or whomever I'm on the air with is there's nobody that's handled any of this better than Caitlin Clark. When there are controversies surrounding her, which, by the way, never involve her. They involve everybody and outside sources, taking things and pulling things and doing whatever they want to create a narrative. Well, in this situation, they didn't involve Tyrese. He didn't do anything, but I thought he handled it perfectly after the game, talking about how his dad shouldn't be there. We need to have a conversation. He apologized to Giannis, he said, and I'm sure followed through on a phone call with Giannis. And to me, that's that. The guy overstepped his boundaries and apologized, and Tyrese apologized, and hopefully that's the end of it. But a unique moment for sure, and it was probably the biggest moment of Tyrese Halliburton's career. So you can understand why Dad would be proud and excited, and hopefully he's kind of learned a lesson about handling those emotions and handling things differently in the future. But I can tell you, John Halliburton, as Rick Carlisle shared afterwards, has a heart of gold and is somebody that would never do any harm intentionally. But of course, how you handle those type of situations is important, and hopefully that's something that will not happen again in the future.
You can listen to the entire interview that I had with Pat Boylan on our podcast. After we complete the show every week, we put the entire content up on your favorite podcast networks. This week, we're going to have Hour 1 and Hour 2 podcasts, but we're also going to have individual podcasts for both my interview with Pat Boylan and for the interview that you're going to hear part of coming up with the great Chris Broussard as well. So just go to your favorite podcast network and you can check out the whole interview. And by the way, both conversations are worth listening to. You're getting courtside insight from Pat Boylan, and in what you didn't hear in the interview that we just completed was the discussion we had about the Indiana Fever, about Caitlin Clark, how exciting this team is, and about the WNBA season. So we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, you're going to listen to the conversation. We're going to listen to the conversation I had with Chris Broussard, who is on Fox Sports 1 and has been, over the last 3.5 decades, one of the great clarion voices of basketball in the United States. So you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Some of the content's a bit dated because I recorded this on Wednesday with Chris. And so some of the games have taken place that we talked about, but it's worth listening to because we really get into the weeds on a lot of issues in the NBA. Thanks again for listening with us this morning. There's more to come here on the Basketball Show on your sports leader, Sports 1440.